explaining UFC's biggest super fights. Now, let me just go over real quick what I would define as a super fight. It would have to be a champ versus champ or some real high tier level shit going down. Okay, so for example, right, if they're in the same division, it's like a real high level contender, but they didn't come from another division, or, you know, they're not already GOAT status established. To me, it just doesn't count as a super fight. And yeah, now obviously these fights have all had a varying degree of success. So let's just get into it. Starting off here, we got probably one of the most disastrous results to a super fight when TJ Dillashaw dropped down to flyweight to take on Henry Cejudo in what was easily widely regarded as one of the scariest and most unnatural weight cuts of all time. Now, Demetrius Johnson tried to get a title shot from TJ Dillashaw as him, you know, dropping to flyweight because, well, they thought he couldn't make the weight.
Yeah, no, we had conversations about that, and I've been pretty open and candid about this. But you know, Sean Shelby, he called me. He says, "Hey, I want you to fight TJ Dillashaw." And I was like, "Okay, pay me $1 million. We'll make it happen."
You go fight TJ?
Yeah, we'll make it happen. And I even told Dana White that too before I was about to fight Kyoto Horiguchi at the press conference. The big, you know, they used to do this when they first started doing those big press conference. And I was like, "Man, just give me $1 million." He goes, "I can't give you what you don't bring in." I was like, "Okay, fair enough. Okay, I understand that." And then fast forward, I beat Kyoto Horiguchi. These keep going on. Me, Sean Shelby were talking, and he says, "You should fight TJ Dillashaw." I was like, "Yeah, pay me $1 million." We're like, "No, we can't make that happen." And then Matt said, "Okay, well, we'll fight TJ, but here's a stipulation we want. If TJ doesn't make weight, which we knew he could not make 125 healthy, right? If he doesn't make 125, we fight for his belt. The fight goes on, but we fight for his belt." They're like, "Oh, no, we can't do that." And I'm like, "Then I have no leverage here."
When it turns out he could, he took on Henry Cejudo, who's already one of the greatest combat athletes of that time. And, well, I mean, he got the result he got. I mean, Henry Cejudo put out TJ Dillashaw within 30 seconds with just an excellent ground and pound knockout KO. It was crazy, man. And ever since then, TJ's career has massively fallen off. As you know, he got popped for EPOs. He's known as like TJ Pillashaw, TJ Killashaw. And he just went on like losing streaks and just absolutely crazy, man. And, well, Henry Cejudo, he did that shit. I mean, he went in there, gritted his fucking teeth, bit down, and said, "I'm going to get his ass out of there." Next up, we got Amanda Nunes versus Cris Cyborg. Now, I think a lot of people forget that this was a super fight. This was champ versus champ when this fight took place. And this was a banger. Both women easily coming out, opening it up, and just swinging and going at it. Now, prior to this fight, no one can really bang with Cris Cyborg like that. You know what I mean? Cris Cyborg was putting people out. I mean, Cyborg was knocking people out like Leslie Smith and Yana Santos in just very dominant fashion. But Amanda Nunes was also someone that could come in and bang, and that's exactly what happened, is Nunes ended up finishing her in the first round. This fight was absolutely insane to watch, and this easily put Nunes at, I would say this is when you could start making an argument that she was top 5, you know, women's GOATs of all time. I mean, because Cris Cyborg in that era was so dominant and was just so ahead in terms of her power and her technique that when someone did catch up like Amanda Nunes, it was crazy. And the rest is history, as then Nunes went to beat everybody. I mean, she torched Ronda Rousey when Ronda Rousey tried to come back and make something out of her. I mean, she like torched Holly Holm. I mean, you know, torched Miocic. I mean, it was just torching people, like consistently torching competition. But Cris Cyborg is still champion, PFL champion, so it all is well, it ends well. Next, we got probably one of the biggest super fights in UFC history. I'm talking BJ Penn, George St. Pierre. The build-up to this fight, absolutely insane. I mean, this was compared to like Thomas Hearns and Marvin Hagler, you know, Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler, like that era of fights. It was crazy. Watching these two in the build-up, it was the best versus the best. BJ Penn was nicknamed the Prodigy, got his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt within 3 years, also won international competition, becoming the first American ever to win the IBJJF Jiu-Jitsu World Championships, and it was a very big deal. I mean, then you had George St. Pierre, who was a great grappler, great wrestler, also faced very high-level opposition and was improving even in the realm of striking, where he's knocking dudes out. I mean, just consistently getting better to the point where he, at that point, was like a moving legend. So when these two fought, it was just like everyone wanted to see it. Now, the first fight was probably more competitive than the second one, but in both, BJ Penn really just didn't have an answer jiu-jitsu wise for George St. Pierre's wrestling, and that just seemed to be a big factor. And then on top of that, George St. Pierre just being so far ahead on the feet against BJ Penn, it was very, very apparent from the get-go. Like, wow, BJ Penn is just blocking shots with his face. Listen, even though the first decision was, a little controversial, George St. Pierre won by, split decision in the first fight. The second one, I believe, was much more definitive. Yeah, man, I mean, and BJ Penn, since then, he's fallen off big time. He had the big, huge mismatch against, like, Yair Rodriguez a couple years later. Really, like, both of their legacies just ultimately went in two different directions, just as a whole. It's really crazy to think about. All right, next one here. I'm not even going to lie. This shit's pretty fucking tragic. But we got Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski, 1 and 2. The first fight was an absolute banger. It was the best of both guys, especially Volkanovski. I was one of those people where I thought Volkanovski won, but I can definitely see why, watching the fight back, why Islam did win. His takedowns were really good. His control time was solid. His striking was also really good as they both dropped each other. But Volkanovski, in the last 30 seconds of that fight, will always be one of the most infamous moments where he drops Islam. Then he just gets the ground and pound on him, and it was crazy. But the second fight, it was much, much more tragic as he came back very late notice, 2 weeks, Volk off the couch, fighting Islam Makhachev, which looking back is absolutely crazy that anybody would even do that, much less a featherweight. But he took the challenge, he stepped up, and he got head kicked, knocked out. I think it was in the first or second round, and it was absolutely insane. Volkanovski then went on to get KO'd by Ilia Topuria, and that fight, with the head kick against Islam, is widely regarded to be a contributing factor to Ilia knocking out Volkanovski. Now, Ilia was very powerful, and that might have happened either way, but it was still very crazy looking back. The build-up to this fight was absolutely awesome because it was the pound-for-pound number one in Volkanovski and the lightweight champ in Islam Makhachev, and they were pretty much fighting for everything on the line except for the featherweight title. Volkanovski said, let's put the pound-for-pound number one up, and you can put your lightweight title up, and he did it twice. It didn't pay off. It didn't work out, but that's what happens, man. I mean, shit, you play the game, and sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. Volkanovski's the champ anyways, so, well, I mean, we win. You know what I mean? We win, and that's all it is to it. All right, so next here, man, we got the Stipe versus Daniel Cormier trilogy, and this was awesome, especially because you got Daniel Cormier with his elite Olympic level wrestling and grappling, tons of experience in the light heavyweight division, and he's faced absolute legends like prior to this fight. I mean, like John Jones, Rumble Johnson, Dan Henderson, Bigfoot Silva. I mean, the list goes on of guys he's fought. But then you had Stipe Miocic, who, I mean, he finished guys like Fabricio Verdum, Alistair Overeem. I mean, very impressive title run. His cardio, his boxing, and his durability is what really sets him apart from most heavyweights, and that's why he's considered the GOAT, on top of him having the most consecutive defenses in heavyweight division in history. And in the first fight, Daniel Cormier went in there and made a statement. He went in there literally wrestling, held him against the cage, dirty boxing, and boom, boom, knocks out Stipe out cold and wins the heavyweight title to become the, one of the few and actually the only guy to be a double champion and defend the belts simultaneously. That's what he did. Absolutely crazy. But then in the second fight, Stipe got his get back as he, the fight was going deep into the fourth round. Both guys were starting to wear it, and Stipe's body shots to DC were excellent, absolutely phenomenal. and he just catches DC along the fence and just starts pinging his fucking head off, and he gets DC out of there. And then you got in the third fight, which ended up being Daniel Cormier's retirement bout and COVID. This fight was a lot less, entertaining in terms of just both guys weren't really at the prime of their career anymore. They're also poking each other's eyes quite a bit, as you could see at the end. And when Daniel Cormier was giving his retirement speech, his eyes all messed up, and Stipe ended up taking it by a decision. Overall, though, this trilogy, I would consider all of them super fights, because you have literally the best versus the best. Goats versus goats. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, it only makes sense for me to talk about this. But now for the last one, I obviously have to talk about the biggest fight the UFC's had of all time, just pay-per-view wise, and even now, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Conor McGregor. This fight was massive. The buildup was crazy. From Khabib slapping Conor McGregor's friend, Artem, to Conor McGregor flying his boys out and throwing the dolly, on the bus that Khabib was on, to then like this absolute descent into madness from Conor McGregor insulting Khabib, insulting Ali Abdelaziz, talking about like 9/11 conspiracies and all this other stuff that I think is true, actually. But I'm not going to speak on that. I'm only here to speak on this fight. And the buildup was insane, and the fight was intense, to say the least, as both guys were really doing good, but Khabib was really showing through with his levels, with his grappling. He even caught McGregor and hurt him and had him just stunned back across the octagon, and then Khabib goes, jumps on his back, submits Conor McGregor, spits on him, then he goes over, chucks his mouthpiece, hops over and fights, Dylan Dennis and McGregor's team, and then you have, Khabib's boys coming in, boxing with McGregor. McGregor's fighting them all over again, and it was wild. It was a crazy scene, easily one of the biggest, if not probably the biggest fight that the UFC's ever had. The buildup was absolutely insane. I mean, Khabib really showed, this really the opposite of, Conor McGregor, just this stoic, quiet man of faith. He's just sitting here like this, all straight up, and McGregor's just like, drinking his proper 12 and, giving Khabib a drink and all this other shit, just trying to really rage bait the fuck out of him. But Khabib just went in there and let it all out in the fight. I mean, it was absolutely insane. All right, you guys, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. This is me explaining UFC's super fights. Now, MMA has had a lot more super fights. There's some in Pride. There's some in Strikeforce even. But we'll get into that in a separate video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment down below, out of, this little list I got going on here, what's your favorite fight? Or even leave down a comment below, what fights did I miss? What fights should I talk about? Make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.